Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. This time of year can get very busy with harvesting and preserving. Lots of condiments, chutneys, jams, sauces and powders are great ways to store the garden's goodness for leaner times. Today though, I'll be harvesting to make a couple of delicious freezer meals. I've got plenty of ingredients in the garden at the moment for two chili dishes. The first one I'm going to make is a vegetarian chili dish with lots of beans and veg in it. The other one is very similar but has meat in addition, and that one is Chilli Con Carne. In today's video, we're going to go around the garden and collect most of the ingredients we need for these two dishes. However, I've already collected the borlotti beans back in January and I've dried them and I've had them stored in the pantry. And right now, we're about to travel back in time to yesterday when I harvested the 4 different beans that we need for the second dish. For the chili bean recipe, I'm going to use mixed beans. I'm growing 4 different beans, and with all the hot, dry weather of late, I've found lots of them just drying off and finishing up. So it's a perfect time to be picking some of these beans and using them in the kitchen. So right here, I've got the beautiful scarlet runner bean. Look at these. Just the colours of different beans is just amazing. Bit hard to get out of there, but look at that, beautiful purple and black beans. Also on this bean trellis, but not quite as plentiful as the scarlet runner bean, is the Ukrainian bean. So let's have a look at those. They're definitely a smaller bean. So they're a lovely little bean too, kind of a purple and white colour. And they grow the most delicious bean that I kind of describe as a butter bean. Really soft and delicate. But these can cook up beautifully as a dried bean as well. Now, while there's plenty of beans on this trellis and more than enough to do my dish today, I do want a mixed bean dish. So we're going to move along to the Lazy Housewife trellis, where right down the end there's plenty of dried beans there too. Yes, right at the end here, the plants dried off a lot quicker than sort of the rest of the garden. So these beans will be perfect. Now these beans aren't quite as colourful. They're just kind of a white bean, but really good in a bean dish. Sometimes you do have to discard some of them, so we'll get rid of those. But in the same pod, you can find plenty that are unaffected by whatever that was. So they're just perfect for the dish that I'm going to make for tomorrow. The fourth bean that I'm going to grab today is from my bean trellis, and it's the Purple King beans. They've been really productive this season, but with the recent hot, again, this has just really dried off. But we've got plenty of dried beans that we can harvest and use in the kitchen. So those beans are a bit plainer than the Ukrainian and scarlet runner bean, just having really faint little purple spots on them. So now we just need to grab 500 grams of beans. I'm just going to grab lots of pods, throw them in my basket, and then get all the little beans out when I get inside. Some of the beans didn't quite go in the right direction, so I'll get these ones off the ground. I think that's enough of the Purple King bean pods. So back to the scarlet runner bean and the Ukrainian bean, and we'll fill up the basket with some of these. And now some lazy housewife. Okay, I think we'll get those potted and see if that's enough. So then it's just a matter of setting yourself up somewhere comfortable and getting all these beautiful beans out of their pods. It's kind of a job that I love to do. And it doesn't take too long before you've got a beautiful big bowl of beans. With all the beans out of their pods, I can weigh that out. For the mixed bean recipe, I need 500 grams of the dried beans, which I am then going to soak overnight. Now, once you've added the water, it's a great opportunity to be able to clean out any bits and pieces that have fallen in with the beans, because you find that most of that floats to the surface. I'm also going to grab my borlotti beans, and for the Chilli Con Carne recipe, I need about 370 grams of dried beans, which, like the 4-bean mix, I'm also going to soak overnight. Now back to today and the garden harvest. First up on our list to gather today are the tomatoes. We need about 500 grams for each recipe. Now for these recipes, I'm gathering different types of tomatoes. This one here is the orange Jean tomato, which is a lovely sweet tomato and will go perfectly in these dishes. We did have pretty dry, hot conditions over the weekend, and it's kind of knocked the life out of some of these tomatoes. Didn't impact too much on some of the plants, so there's plenty of moisture in the soil, but it's kind of the time for the tomatoes to be finishing off, I think. So we'll gather up these beautiful orange tomatoes, which all seem to ripen at the same time with all these hot conditions. Now we're moving into the Tigerella variety. I love these little tomatoes. You can sort of quarter them and they're easy to throw in a salad. But I still have made heaps of soups and just pasta sauces and stock pastes out of these little tomatoes too. Moving along from the Tigerellas, we get to this little tomato here, which in one of my videos I did say it was a blueberry tomato, but it's actually a cross, I believe, of a blueberry and maybe the Tigerella. I did save seeds last season, and that's not grown true to form, but they're a gorgeous little tomato. I did find that they were one that ripened really early on in the tomato season, so I might save seeds from that one and see if we can get it going again. Just across the aisle from those little tomatoes, we've got a blueberry tomato which has grown true to variety. Now, when they're ripe, they're actually quite a pink colour rather than a red colour. Quite different. And they do ripen a lot later than those other little tomatoes too. So who knows, maybe both have a place in the garden. You can see the difference there. One's quite pink and the other's more the tomato red colour. Well, I think we've got well and truly over a kilo of tomatoes here, so let's move on to harvesting the next ingredients. Now, the vegetarian chili bean dish needs some red onions, and I was just out in this garden the other day and came across some that I hadn't harvested yet, and they're going to be perfect in this dish. I kind of just use up what I've got there. And while I was out here, I also thought that perhaps I could just use the white part of all of these green onions. I'll save the tops for my onion powder, But some of these white bottoms I could chop up and fry as sort of an onion substitute for the chili con carne. There's some pretty substantial stalks here, so I thought if I drag those out and we'll see what we can use. I do have some brown onions still in the pantry, but I like the idea of making the most of what's still growing in my garden. So I think if I just chop that up finely, that would be a great substitute for a brown onion. Chop that off. And yeah. Next up on the list is some carrots. Now it calls for 2 large carrots for the chili bean dish. I think probably out of this patch we'll get 3 or 4 smaller carrots, but we'll see how we go. Yeah, I'd say that's a medium carrot. I've got a new patch of carrots coming along, but they're quite a bit smaller than these ones here. Okay, there we go. 4 smaller carrots will be perfect. Now the recipe calls for 2 sticks of celery, but my celery is only about this big at the moment. So what I'm going to do is substitute the celery stalks for a couple of stalks from the Swiss chard. That will go perfectly sliced up in this recipe, and this can be used for something else. Perfect. Next up, we're in my capsicum and basil patch. I've got some beautiful cinnamon basil just there for the fragrance, along with some sweet basil, which could have done with a little bit more watering over these hot days. But it has helped some of the capsicums to ripen up. So I've got some red Marconi capsicums that I can pick for one of the recipes. And the Chilli Con Carne actually uses a green capsicum. I've got a plant here with some beautiful fruit that we can take for the recipe. That's one. Oh, I might just take a second one as well. Okay, add those to our harvest basket. And just over here are the red capsicums that we're going to grab. This season I planted 2 different capsicums. This one is what they call a Marconi capsicum, and with the recent warm weather I've got quite a few ripening. The other variety that I've just picked is the California Wonder. I might even just grab a third. I think those 3 will do nicely. With the recent hot spell, while it's knocked around some of the garden, it actually has made plants like this chili plant very happy, and I'm getting quite a few red fruit. And in my climate, red fruit isn't always guaranteed because you don't always get those really hot days when you need it. So a chili plant with red fruit on it makes me very happy as well. So we've got our 4 little bird's eye chilies for the chili con carne. So that's the harvest complete for our 2 recipes today. Along with the dried beans, it's going to make 2 delicious chili dishes. I'm going to head off to the kitchen now and make a start on these 2 recipes. Hang in to the end of the video if you'd like to see the progress and the end product. And if you're feeling inspired to make something similar, I'll leave the recipes in the description. Thanks so much for coming with me for my garden harvest today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Bye for now. For the vegetarian chili dish from the garden, we have the chopped up red onion, chopped up Swiss chard stalks, which is the substitute for the celery stalks. We've got our carrots all diced up, And this is our red peppers diced. And I've just taken the tomatoes and processed it through the food processor. All the juices and skins, the whole lot is just gone into that. Along with the soaked beans, I've got some beef broth that I've grabbed out of the pantry, some lime juice that has been frozen, coriander that's been frozen and chopped up. I've got 2 teaspoons of cumin, got 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1.5 teaspoons of smoked paprika, some tallow. Now the recipe called for 4 cloves of crushed garlic, but I've just used some fermented garlic paste. I've got dried oregano from the kitchen garden, a bay leaf I've just grabbed, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. First thing to do is fry up the vegetables for around 10 minutes. When the veg has cooked down a little bit, you add in your oregano, garlic, paprika, cumin and chili powder and give it a good stir. And just cook that for a minute while constantly stirring. To the vegetables, I've now added the tomato, bay leaf, the soaked beans, and finally I'm adding in my 2 cups of broth. Give that a nice stir up. Now I'm just going to leave that on a gentle heat to simmer away for a few hours until all the beans are nice and tender. A few hours later, we've got all the beans, they're nice and tender, and the sauce is really thickened up. This looks really lovely. So all we need to do now is add lime juice, coriander, and a bit of salt, and give it a stir. And that's our chili bean dish. For the chili corn can from the garden, we've chopped up that bit of green onion, and that looks quite good. That's the substitute for the brown onion. We've got the green pepper chopped up. We've got our processed tomatoes, and there's the beautiful red bird's eye chilies. In addition to our lovely soaked borlotti beans, we've also got 1 kilo of mince, 2 cups of beef stock, 3 tablespoons of some tallow, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, bay leaf, a crushed garlic clove, although I've just used 1/2 teaspoon of my fermented garlic paste, and 1 teaspoon of paprika. To start cooking the chili con carne, heat up your oil, and then you pop in your meat, your capsicum and your onion, and fry that up until the meat has browned. Once the meat's browned, throw in all the rest of the ingredients. So tomatoes in, the beef stock, and I'm just including the fat that was in the beef stock. And finally, we've got our beans we can add in. Just give that a bit of a stir up. Now we're going to leave this on the stove for probably 2 or 3 hours. Again, I'll be checking the beans to see when they're cooked. The recipe calls for canned beans, and the recipe only cooks this for an hour, but I'm just going to keep an eye on it because I'm not sure how long these beans from the garden are going to take. The chili con carne is all finished now. That's been on for a couple of hours, and the beans are nice and tender. So I'll cool that down and then pack it just into mason jars and pop that in the freezer. It's fantastic to get all that produce out of the garden and into the freezer.